Hey class, in this recording we are going to be focusing on the cranial nerves. Before we dive in and look at them in visible body, I want to emphasize that this is how you need to write your answers. You must write your answers this way. Please do not use Arabic numerals, use Roman numerals. And put those Roman numerals in a parentheses. As we've stated before, and it's been stated again, kind of ad nauseum, we need to use your answers exactly as they're listed on the lab objective sheet. I know in visible body and some other sources Arabic numerals are used, but we're going to be consistent with your lab manual. So as we look at these cranial nerves, let's dive into it. The rule of thumb for cranial nerves is that they are going to go from anterior down towards the spinal cord. So as we number these, we're going to start kind of towards the front of the brain, the frontal lobe, and we'll work our way to the midbrain, and then to the pons, and then finally to the medulla oblongata. If you're looking for a mnemonic to help you have those memorized, I want to go ahead and just highlight these right now. There's a lot of mnemonics out there. The one I like is O, 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 to touch and feel very green vegetables at home. You know, it's a pretty good, safe, G-rated mnemonic that's easy to remember. When I was an undergrad, I had more of a PG-13 rated mnemonic that I used. But now that I'm the course instructor, I like to keep it no more than PG. The reproductive system's a little PG-13, I'll be honest. But we want to keep it as clean as possible. So here we have the olfactory nerve, the first cranial nerve. And I'll pull that up in visible body. I have a saved view right here of all of our cranial nerves kind of cleaned up. This is the view that I've shared with you. As we look at this view, the olfactory nerve, if we really want to be technical, is going to be within the peripheral nervous system only. And it's going to be these tiny little branches. The olfactory bulb and the olfactory tract are technically part of the central nervous system and not nerves. For the sake of simplicity, though, we usually will just include the olfactory bulbs and the olfactory tracts with the olfactory nerves, and particularly in lab exams, for in-person exams where we're working with our plastic brains or dissected brains, we'll just use the olfactory bulbs and olfactory tracts to represent the olfactory nerve, cranial nerve number 1. So that's our first cranial nerve. Our second cranial nerve, second one on the list, is going to be cranial nerve number 2, the optic nerve. As the name implies, it's the nerve that carries our sense of vision back from the eye. So there's one optic nerve. Here's another optic nerve. So we have our 2 optic nerves coming back from the eye. So now that we've got those established, I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of those eyeballs, just because they're big. They take up a lot of space on the screen. So we have the olfactory, then we have the optic, and then when we have another O, we have the oculomotor nerve. Now as we're looking for our oculomotor nerve, we're just going to continue our path. So we went kind of towards the frontal lobe, then we made it to the midbrain, and here we have the oculomotor nerve. As the name implies, the oculomotor nerve is going to be responsible for controlling most of our eye movements, the muscles of our eyes. So here we can see those oculomotor nerves. Up next, we have the trochlear nerve. As we're looking at our trochlear nerve, this one's a little bit more difficult to find. I should zoom out a skosh here. It's a stinker. It's actually going to emerge from the posterior of the brainstem. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the cerebellum. And here we can see the trochlear nerves. For our reference points, we have, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in really close here. We have the pineal gland, the superior tectum, or colliculi, and the inferior colliculi. The superior and inferior colliculi combined, all 4 of these combined on your lab objective sheet, just to review, is the corpora quadrigemina. And then directly inferior to the corpora quadrigemina, we have the trochlear nerves. And those trochlear nerves are the only cranial nerves that have an origin. Let me shift our view here a little bit. Are the only ones that have an origin on the posterior of the brainstem. So here we go, right there. There's our view. And those trochlear nerves are then going to move and extend towards the anterior of the skull to here. So we've had O, 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 2 for our first 4 cranial nerves. Cranial nerve number 5 is known as the trigeminal nerve. The trigeminal nerve is the largest cranial nerve in terms of cross-sectional area. So we have a trigeminal nerve right here, and another trigeminal nerve right there, and there's some large ganglia associated with those trigeminal nerves. Wrong button. I meant to say multi-select. These ganglia are going to each have 3 branches associated with them. Those 3 large branches of the trigeminal nerve are its namesake, trigeminal, having 3 main branches. We, in this class, are not going to ask you to memorize all of the 3 branches. We just want you to know the trigeminal nerve. Our next cranial nerve on the list is the abducens nerve, cranial nerve number 6. As we're looking at the abducens nerve, we're going to continue our pathway. And we're now going to continue heading down towards the spinal cord. The abducens nerve originates, or has a point of origin, between the pons and the medulla oblongata toward the midline of the body. So there is our abducens nerve. The abducens nerve will also extend anteriorly as well. So that was cranial nerve number 6. Number 7 is the facial nerve. As we're looking at the facial nerve, our facial cranial nerves, let's get rid of the multi-select there. There we go. It will also have some ganglia associated with it. So here we go. We have the left and right facial nerves highlighted for us. These facial nerves are grouped right next to our other cranial nerve, but I want to emphasize they are separate cranial nerves. So there we have, between the interface of the pons and the medulla oblongata, here we have the facial nerves that originates on the lateral margin of that interface. Next we have the vestibulocochlear nerve, cranial nerve number 8. This cranial nerve is going to originate right next to the facial nerve. As its name implies, it's going to go to the vestibule and cochlea of the inner ear. It's going to conduct our sense of balance and our sense of hearing to the brain. Our next cranial nerve is the glossopharyngeal nerve, number 9, cranial nerve number 9. The glossopharyngeal nerve, as we're looking at it, is going to continue its pathway or continue, I should say, down towards the spinal cord. So we just went from the vestibulocochlear nerve. Here we have the glossopharyngeal nerve. That glossopharyngeal nerve is going to originate on the medulla oblongata. Our next cranial nerve is the vagus nerve. As we look at our vagus nerve, I want to zoom out for us very far. The vagus nerve is the wandering nerve. Let me go ahead and clean this up here. There we go. I'll just keep zooming in. And there we go. So we have our vagus nerves. And I'll go ahead and get the ganglia of the vagus nerves selected as well. just so it looks like one kind of coherent pathway. So to find the vagus nerve, it's going to originate right here, next to our previous nerve, the glossopharyngeal nerve. And then that vagus nerve is notable in that it's the longest cranial nerve of the body. Our next cranial nerve is the accessory nerve, cranial nerve number 11. As we are looking at cranial nerve number 11, let me go ahead and pull that up for us right here. I'll zoom in. Need to get rid of the multi-select. There we go. And here we, oh, come on. Sometimes Visible Body doesn't want to actually click on the thing I'm trying to click on, or let me click on the thing I am trying to click on. So here we have the left and right accessory nerves highlighted within our brain structure. Here is a posterior view of those nerves being highlighted. So that's cranial nerve number 11, the accessory nerve. And then finally, cranial nerve number 12 is the hypoglossal nerve. Well, we look at the hypoglossal nerve. This is going to be the most inferior nerve and medially oriented nerve. So most inferior and medial nerve of the cranial nerves. So that is it for our cranial nerves. I recommend that you practice just going down the line, clicking on the nerves and being able to identify the nerves as you click on them. I know with Invisible Body up here in the corner, they give you the name of the structure you click on. So you can put a post-it on your computer screen. Just don't look at that name. It's possible just to slide it off to the side here so that you don't have to see it if you have trouble keeping your eyes from wandering. Anyways, class, those are the 12 cranial nerves. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them in the class discussion board or shoot me an email. And as always, happy studies.